Hey, everybody. We're here, alive and thrive, in Toronto, home of Blue Jays, Raptors, Maple Leafs, and Canadian psychic Robert Lindsay Milne. And that's me. Welcome to my side of the crystal ball. Tonight's episode is absolutely out of this world. We're going to be talking about dimensions and ideas and concepts that have never been on my side of the crystal ball before. Um, Alien contact, alien abductions, being on an alien spacecraft, having contact with aliens, and even being moved around and shuffled. Bright lights in the sky and a myriad of other things my guest is going to be talking about tonight. And my guest is Debra Jacobson, former fellow Torontonian, now living on the West Coast of the United States. Before we get to this fascinating episode, though, we have a couple of requests. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. This way that we can get, the more subscriptions that we get, the more popular my side of the crystal ball becomes, and the more recognition and the more views we have. And the more views we have, the more we can do the show. So please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And by the way, if you make a comment, I promise you I will comment you right back. So besides YouTube, you can also find us on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, and pretty much anywhere else that you find your podcasts. And you can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And if you would like to get in touch with me personally, you can find me on Facebook as Robert Lindsay Milne. You can find me on my website, www.robertlindsay.com. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok. Now, let's find out what WWRS is all about tonight. I've got a confession to make. I want to share something with you, very, very personal. Over the past while, 2-3 years, I've been rather vocal about being kind. I end this podcast with just be kind. I make lots of posts about being kind, and I do a lot of kind things. People respond in interesting ways and say things about me because I do such nice, kind things. I have to tell you the truth, though. Why I do such nice things. I assure you it's a purely selfish reason. Let me just give you an example. Last week, probably Thursday, so 4 or 5 days ago, I was outside sweeping the leaves off the front walkway, the sidewalk in the driveway. And as I was doing that, I have to admit I was in a really crabby mood. I was just worried about stuff, and the way, how life is. And I was feeling miserable and cranky. And as I was pushing the broom and sweeping up the leaves, I looked just down to my left, down the street, down a big hill. I saw this woman shuffling slowly, walking up the sidewalk. And as she got closer, I was sweeping the leaves. As she and I swept all the leaves from the driveway right to the sidewalk. As she was getting closer, I was just kind of looking at her, and I saw an older woman. Maybe she wasn't as old as me, but she looked very old, and her face was wrinkled, not just with age as in being older, but the wrinkles that someone has on their face when they've carried a heavy weight their lifetime. when life has been a burden. She was of a darker complexion than I, and I think she had a walker. And she struggled as she was walking up the sidewalk. She also had the look of being someone that did manual labor, working in someone's kitchen or being a cleaner or some type of worker like that. I also had the sense that, now this is all coming to me, I also had the sense that, she raised children and grandchildren, and, and Canada wasn't her native land. As she got closer, I also saw her face was sad. And I don't know what struck me to do this, but all of a sudden I started to speed up, sweeping all the leaves off the sidewalk. And I did it really, really, really fast. And just as she got to me on the sidewalk, I looked at her and I said, "See, just for you, a nice clean sidewalk." And she looked at me, and her tired, lean face, she looked back at me and she smiled. I've been laughing my ass off ever since Thursday. So the reason I do kind things is because it makes me feel so good. And that's what Robert has to say. When I think of extraterrestrials and spaceships and things like that, I'm immediately start thinking of Star Trek and both the first episodes and with Kirk, and then with the Next Generation, and I kind of see that's how extraterrestrials or space people are, or like that. Was that your first experience? Is that what you learned about extraterrestrials that way? Like, was it like we see in Star Trek?
You know, I was a very big fan of Star Trek. And, in watching that, now when I look back on it, I feel like some of those people definitely had to have had some experiences. So it wasn't just creative writing. So there were some things in there that I think I could relate to, that I felt were part of my experience. But I would say in my younger years, when I started to have experiences, I wasn't really influenced by that, but I was fascinated more by, the stories and just that somebody was actually talking about that. So, for a lot of people, it was entertainment, but for me, it was like, hey, this has kind of been part of my everyday life since my youngest years, like as far back as I can remember.
When did you first realize, when did you first realize you were being contacted by aliens? Or how do you refer to them?
I'm glad that you brought that up right at the beginning here, because I feel like we give labels to things so that we can understand what we're talking about.
Yes.
But what are they really? Are they interdimensional?
Yes.
Are they extraterrestrial? Are they us from the future?
What are they?
We don't know exactly.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. So I don't have that answer.
So
okay. I just use these labels because it helps us to use it as a reference. So I'm going to say my earliest experiences were very, very young. I mean, I remember being probably a few years old, and I at night would see lights, balls of light come into the bedroom, and on a regular basis, they would come and visit me. And I didn't think anything, I liked it. Like, it was very playful. And
Well,
they were,
when you say balls coming into your bedroom, were they, so what did they look like? Balls, but what are they like?
so I remember being in my crib
Yeah.
and
Really? Wow.
I would stand out. I can remember really far back, like probably people say that children can't remember from when they're an infant, but I actually do. And I have incidents I remember very clearly. And I remember standing up, looking out
Yes.
from the crib. And so when I say a ball, I'm going to say, think of it as a disc, a round disc,
Yeah.
spinning, but not that way, spinning that way. And brilliant.
Counterclock way, you mean, as opposed to?
I knew you were going to ask me that. And I was thinking of that today. Clockwise or counterclockwise? And I actually just saw one this morning before we start to chat.
An orb,
Clockwise.
Like a light?
So basically think of a disc.
Yes.
And tiny, tiny little pinpoints of the most brilliant light that you can possibly imagine. And it starts off as a point of light in the darkness, and it starts spinning and it gets bigger and bigger and more intense until it's so close to my eyes that I'm almost blinded by it.
Wow.
And the intensity of it and the feeling of it is incredible. I mean, it's like this connection, it's like a bonding, it's like a belonging, and it's very enjoyable. I mean, it's really a joyful kind of connection. There's no fear or anything connected to it. And then there is telepathic communication.
So do you get encompassed by that bright light, or is it just around you? Around you as in outside of you, but near you?
It comes right up into my eyes.
Wow.
So that at that one point, I'm almost blinded by the brightness of it. And then it will either go away or I'll see multiples of them around me. And then at times there'll be communication. And usually it's not too in depth. It's a word or two here or there. And I used to see these all the time as a child. And to me, I thought, you know, this is normal. I just assumed everybody saw these beings.
What were they doing?
They were visiting me. It was so
Just
playful.
saying hi?
Yep, they would come in at night and I would just see them and it'd be like, hey, you know, and just playful coming around me. And I was quite young at the time. So obviously at that point, they really weren't saying too much to me because, you know, my communication skills weren't developed at that young an age. But at one point, probably a few years later, I shared a room with my sister. And I remember asking her one night, hey, what are those lights that come in the room at night? Like, who are they? Because she's my older sister. And I start to get very curious. And she's like, what lights? I'm like, you know, the spinning lights. And at that point, I had this revelation, like, what do you mean? Like, not everybody is seeing these? And she had no idea what I was talking about. And then I start thinking like, wow, okay, then what is this? Because why am I only seeing this? It didn't scare me, but it was kind of a moment where I was like.
So how old would you have been then?
I had to have been 4 years old, maybe 3 or 4 years old. Yeah.
That's a vibrant memory for such a young person.
I can remember my dad changing my diapers.
No kidding.
Believe it or not, had an incident where I had my first moment of feeling, this is strange, a little bit embarrassed. My dad was changing my diaper. And it was like my consciousness was outside my body. I was seeing my dad and I just had this moment of like, oh, he's changing my diaper. I've never forgotten that.
That interesting.
Right? Like that's unusual, but
so
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
You and your sister were sharing the bedroom, and then you realized that she wasn't seeing what you were seeing.
Yes, I realized, like,
What was that like?
it was strange because for me, it was normal. So when you're, that young and you have these experiences, you don't have that fear. Like when you get older, you can have experiences and think like, oh, what is it that's fearful? It was just normal. It was very normalized to me. So then I really start to question, like, well, what is this about? And I had a lot of experiences where I would see things and, I think I kind of scared my parents, and they'd be like, oh, no, oh, that's your imagination. And I would argue with them and say,
So,
no, it's not.
what were the lights doing with you when you're or coming? What were they doing with you when you were sharing the room with your sister? And did they appear, but only to you?
She would be sleeping.
Mm.
And so it was never when she was awake. But I can tell you that in subsequent years, when I would see them, if other people were around, they didn't see them.
Sure.
But I can share later an incident where people were aware of them and they sensed them, but they didn't see them. So that in a way was a little bit of confirmation for me, but I can go into that a little bit later on.
You can go into it now if you want, anything you want, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this, at that same time,
Yes.
around that same time, I had an incident where I was in the family kitchen and my parents were always big on giving us big meals and feeding us. And, their parents came from tough times in Europe and they didn't have enough food. So, my parents were always like, feed them. And I wasn't a big eater. And so my parents just decided one night, she's going to stay there in that kitchen and you're going to sit there and eat that meal and you're going to eat it until you're done. And everybody else had finished. So there I was sitting in the kitchen and it was getting dark out. And I was sitting there thinking, like, I really don't want to eat this food. And I felt my body kind of jerk up above the table. And we kind of had this interesting kind of a nook around the table. And it kind of pulled me up over the nook. And I felt myself flying across the kitchen. And I'm now at this point, like in disbelief, like, oh, what is going on here? I'm flying. And my parents had the windows open because it was warm out. It was a summer night. They didn't have the screen on the window. And I got to the point where I was over the sink. And at this point, I was terrified because I was not astral projecting. I was physically being pulled, through the air. And I remember grabbing on to the ledge of the window and it kept tugging me and tugging me. And I'm holding the ledge. And we had an empty lot in behind our house. So there was no home built. And there was some kind of craft there. And all I could think of was, I don't want to go. And I just said, please, God, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And at that moment, the tugging stopped and I was turned around and was brought back to the table. I could see my plate was still sitting there with the food. And I wasn't there. So I knew it wasn't like an astral projection because I didn't see my body there. And I was simply placed back down in the seat. And at the moment I sat down, I ran to my mother and started screaming.
How old were you?
That's probably 3, 4. If I think about that house that we lived in, I would have been 3 or 4 at that time.
What did they want with you?
I think so, and this is going to sound strange to some and others are going to relate. I think I am one of them, or I have been one of them. I felt my whole life that such a deep connection that I think it's an agreement that we made long before coming here, because it's always been a part of my life, always. and it's never felt strange to me, and it has not felt fearful in any way. I don't feel like I had like the negative abduction experiences that some people have where they're going, I don't feel like this group of beings are those kind that are physically taking you and experimenting on you. I don't. I feel like it's a connection to better understand our human experience. That's how I feel about it. I could be wrong because I'm extrapolating, because we don't know who they are or what they are. We don't know how they think, how they process. So we can only go from our human perspective and say, hey, this is how it feels to me, but it may not be accurate. But that's, that's all we can do, right? We can only try to understand our experience that way.
So how do they still come to you now, or are you still drawn to them? Or does that still happen in your life?
I have a way that if I go into like a meditative state, that I can call on them. And it's interesting because I had one this morning. I hadn't seen one in a long time. And part of that too, I find like if I'm very distracted, if I'm kind of stressed out or I'm just working a lot, then it's sort of like that gate isn't open so much. But as soon as I can kind of get into a peaceful space, so they're aware of this conversation because
I was about to ask something. Yeah. I was about to ask, do you think that there was that appearance because of your appearance with me?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, they're aware of this. Yeah.
What do you think that they would be gathering from this experience that we're having as you're talking about them? What do you think what's that one like?
Wanting to share with people at a time where I think there's a lot going on in the world. I mean, there always is, but I think we're at a turning point in our consciousness. And I think there's much more of a normalization of people regarding anything extraterrestrial or interdimensional. It's becoming part of our mainstream. And I think the average person would say to you right now, yeah, I think it's possible that there are other beings in the universe. But I think 50 years ago, people wouldn't have said that. But I think if you went back into ancient times, people would have said, yes, there are, because I think when the technological age took over and people just start focusing on everything has to be science, has to be hard facts, material that we can see, they got away from what maybe that other reality is. And because they're functioning in a different way, it doesn't mean that our science can measure that. So we have to kind of be aware of looking at it a different way.
Are they a protection for you as well?
I believe so. I really do. I mean, I had an incident one time where I was living in the Canadian Rockies and I was driving down the highway. There was only myself and one other vehicle in front of me. And this vehicle, this truck on this very icy road, all of a sudden put its brakes on. Oh, this road was icy. So I had to brake. And coming up from behind me was a big semi truck. Well, that truck in front of me put its brakes on because it decided to cross the median and go to the other side, which obviously shouldn't be doing. Well, my car spun out and I ended up head on in the other lane facing a semi truck. And I could see the whites of the eyes of the driver in the truck. And it was like, oh my God. And I thought, this is it. I'm done. There's no way I can get out of this. And at that moment, when I was within a few feet of head on hitting the semi, it was like a hand came down from the heavens. It picked up my vehicle, it turned it around and put it in the other lane. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there facing straight ahead in the other lane, and I could see the semi truck go past me, and the look on the driver's face was just complete shock, like, what just happened? And I just sat there sitting straight ahead, looking straight ahead, going, what just happened? Something just plucked my car right out from in front of the semi. So who did that? What did that? Don't know. But there's just no logic to how that happened.
If you were going to guess how it happened, what would be your best guess?
Some kind of tractor beam of some kind, some technology. Don't know what it is. Obviously was not my time, but they or something plucked me right out of the path of that truck. There's just no logic. Excuse me, there's no rhyme or reason to how that could have happened. And that truck driver's face said it all. It was just like, wow, it was just wow.
So you were talking about the mothership when you were a young girl.
Yeah.
Did you that you saw it in your backyard? Is that right, or over your backyard?
Well, this was I was at a friend's
Mhm.
house that was in my neighborhood, and she lived right near a park. And so, as teenagers, we would go and hang out in the park, and we would talk. And I hate to say it, but we would try to smoke cigarettes.
Oh, yes.
That experimental phase, etc. And so we were out there one night, and it was summertime, so it was really warm. And we were chatting, and we were kind of just looking up at the stars. And we started to notice the stars were moving. So at first we just thought, maybe it's a fleet of aircraft, like maybe the Air Force is doing something. But what was really unusual about it is that these lights that looked very much just like the sky and the stars were moving together. They weren't moving separately. So obviously, if you had different aircraft, you'd see the lights moving, differently, like, separate. And it wasn't separate. It was like very black with lights, excuse me. And then it was all moving together, but it was moving very slowly. And so we were lying there watching it, and we're like, this is just going on and on and on and on. And it was massive. I mean, it just wasn't stopping for about half an hour. We sat out there and went, what is this? What are we seeing here? We couldn't fathom it. And when it finally came to the end of it, then you could see the stars again, which looked very different. But it was like it was camouflaging because it was dark with little lights. So the average person just walking along, looking at the sky, might have said, oh, yeah, it's just the sky. But it wasn't. It had to have been an absolutely massive, massive ship, because we had to have been out there at least half an hour.
What do you think they were looking at or for?
That I can't answer, but
if you were going to guess,
I'm gonna guess.
do that one.
I think they're around. I think they're around all the time.
With you, for you, or
Well,
everybody?
I mean, I think for everyone. I think they're around the planet. They are here. They're very much a part of our space, but we don't see them if we don't know how to tune into it. And we're very distracted. Our lives are filled with a lot of distraction, but if you stop, and I think that's why people who meditate have a lot of experiences.
Okay.
That's just, slowing things down enough to see them.
So you've seen the ships or the way they get around. Have you ever been on one?
Well, that's a good question. So
Well, it's certainly an obvious one to know,
the
right?
obvious question. When I was about, well, this was in 67, this happened. So summer night, nobody had air conditioning in those days.
I remember that
Remember?
summer of 67 very, very
Oh my
well.
gosh, yeah. Excuse me, I'm having some allergies today.
So sorry.
And we, in my bedroom, my
Yeah.
sister and I shared this bedroom, and we had this very broad window that almost covered the whole wall. And we had the windows open because it was hot and it's very very humid.
Mhm.
And we didn't want to go to bed because it was the summertime and we weren't in school, and you know, parents would let you stay out till 9 o'clock at night, but then it was like they wanted their peace and quiet, so up to bed you went. And so my sister's bed was near the window and mine was just a little bit apart from her, and we were doing what a lot of kids did, which was we were jumping on the bed. We're jumping on the bed, and my sister was she was facing, and I was looking out the window. So we're jumping and we're laughing and giggling, and right at the window, all of a sudden, I see an extraterrestrial vehicle, like right at the window. So I stopped.
What did it look like?
I mean, Robert, it was right
okay
there.
Yeah.
So it had kind of a typical saucer shape. It looked very white and luminescent on the bottom. The top had almost looked like translucent, but with a kind of a bluish turquoise color.
Yeah.
And it did have some kind of a sound emanating, and it went just slowly past the window, enough for me to see it, and it went slowly past. And I stopped. I was in such utter shock that, you know, we were jumping and laughing and having a good time. And then I suddenly stopped and I was pointing and I couldn't speak because I was in such shock. And I was like, you know, till I could finally get out, look. And my sister's looking at me like, what's going on? What's wrong? What's wrong? And then I just blurted it out, you know. In those days, I said, oh, I saw like a spaceship. And I ran downstairs because, you know, my parents would sometimes sit out in front of the house at night. People would sit on their porch and look out. And I ran out. They weren't out there, but there was a dog that someone had tied to a lamppost. So I don't know if they were just visiting someone or something. And the dog was going crazy. The dog was trying to pull off the rope and it was barking and going crazy. And I never forgot that because I remember thinking back, well, you know, it's probably reacting to this.
Yeah.
And to me, that was shocking. And I even drew a picture of it. I had the mind to draw a picture and do a description. And then there was a radio station that, you know, like teenagers would listen to and you could call into. And I remember calling them and, you know, just saying like, oh, I think I saw.
Was it Chum by any chance?
It was Chum. It was Chum. It was
lucky
Chum.
guess. Lucky guess, right?
Good guess. It was Chum. And then I remember thinking like, should I call like the Air Force, whatever? But I mean, I had the mind to think like, maybe I should tell someone this. But that was that was major because I felt like they showed themselves to me like that on purpose for me to see it, for them to go so slowly and just cruise by my window. I mean, amazing. And again, I wasn't afraid, but it was just utter, you know, shock and disbelief that it could be right there in front of my window.
So
you know?
what color was it again that you saw?
The bottom of it was white, but
Yeah.
it could also have been just like very silver or light. It was kind of like
Okay.
luminescent. The
Okay.
top of it was almost like a dome that
I
was
can,
also had a luminescent look to it. So it didn't give off light, but it was light inside of it.
okay.
Yeah. And then there was a sort of a sound, almost like a beeping of some kind, that caught my attention.
What scale was it? Was it a high sound or a low sound, that beeping?
It was a high sound.
Was
Yeah,
it?
it's
Was
definitely.
it shrill or a hum? Oh,
Later experiences I had, it was a hum, but this was not. This was, to me, audibly, it just sounded like a real high-pitched beeping,
okay.
that kind of a vibration. Yeah.
And it didn't frighten you. You were more just,
I
what's
was just,
this? Or
I
oh,
mean, I'm jumping on my bed as a kid having a
right,
good time.
right.
And now suddenly right in front of my window. And in fact, it was big enough that it took up the whole window. So I saw the beginning of it, and then it took up the whole span
I see.
of the window. And then as it moved along, I could see, the end of it.
But
So
your
it
sister
really,
didn't see it.
she was facing me,
Oh, okay.
jumping on the
Okay.
bed, because we were
Ah,
jumping on the
right.
bed, laughing
Okay.
and talking to
Yeah.
each other. And what's interesting is when I've talked to her about it in later years, she then says she did see it. That wasn't my experience at the time. So it's, I don't know if she did see it or not, but she certainly did know that something happened, and that she saw my reaction, and that I couldn't speak because I just was in such shock and running outside. And I didn't see it though. I mean, I looked up, it was gone. So for me, for that to have happened, I feel like, well, they put on a show for me. They put on a display. They wanted me to see them.
Do you think that there's any connection to those lights that were coming in when you were a little kid to that ship that was going by in front of your window? Do you think that they were preparing you for a connection?
I think so. I think it's related. Now, are they the same beings? Hard to say, because I think like there are many of them, and maybe
Oh,
they even work together just like we do with other people from other
sure.
communities, other countries. So hard to say, because I think I have not identified where they are from, but others have told me in experiences where they're saying they're from. But these beings have never really told me, and I've never felt like it was that important to identify
No.
it. But I did
Okay.
get an interesting message about sort of reaching out later on, and I think they were building me up to a point where it was normalized for me, that I wouldn't be afraid, and that the connection could be more significant, more meaningful as I grew up and became more mature and could process information more so. And so it's kind of good that they did it from a young age, because then I wasn't afraid and I was used to seeing them. And then when these experiences happen, they were enjoyable. I mean, I appreciated them and I could process them. And it was like a little bit of a leaking of information here and there and there and there to build up to a more meaningful connection with them.
So you were being groomed for
Yeah,
something.
in a sense. I mean, I wouldn't use it groomed in the negative sense, like how, some people use that word, but yeah, groomed in the
Mine
sense of kind of,
was neutral. You
yeah,
were being prepared for something.
correct. Yeah.
Right.
So just kind of,
How about groomed, groomed in a nurturing way?
I think so, because
Okay.
none of it was fearful.
Groomed as if they were brushing your hair.
Exactly.
Okay.
And saying, hey, we're connecting, or
Yes.
we're reconnecting.
Or we're safe for you.
Yeah. And I enjoy that connection immensely, but I feel that I have seen other types of beings. So there was an incident where
did you ever get a ride on one of their ships?
well, so I was just
you know, I'm going, we can wait till the end, but I'm going crazy wondering, you know, you're driving me crazy. Yeah.
Well, there was an incident where I had been sort of meditating. I had gone into a deep meditation, and in having done that, I have astral projected a few times, not meaning to, but in having had that experience, realizing that you can travel, but you don't have to be in your body, and you can be 100% fully conscious. Okay. And that's how I felt this incident happened, where I had made this connection, and I found myself on board what seemed like a light ship, but like I was in a sort of a round galley. I was with a group of people. There was a tall blonde being wearing sort of like a one-piece kind of a blue suit. And we were being given like a tour, but it was like instructions. Nobody was really speaking. It was all telepathic. And I saw this being, he was showing us something, and it was like the top of this panel of this ship that was very luminescent inside. So it wasn't like regular lights, but it was illuminated somehow. So I don't know how they do that. That's some part of their technology. It opened up and I could see the sky. I mean, I could see outer space, essentially, like it wasn't within our atmosphere. And he took something and he launched it. And I remember thinking, no way, I cannot believe it. Here I am with these beings that I would assume are so advanced. Are you launching a rocket to shoot at someone? My heart kind of sunk. And he immediately looked at me and said to me telepathically, no, we're launching a probe to test this environment, the environment in this area of space.
Wow. That
was the response. So he immediately picked up on me thinking like, oh, so are you warring beings just like what's going on our planet? And it was like, no, it's a probe. It's a probe. Yeah. So that was
because they were checking out the environment for them. Would it be safe for them to go to? Is that what they were doing?
If he did explain further, I don't remember the rest of that conversation. The most significant part was that they were testing that area of space with some kind of probe. So whichever area of space we were in, they were launching it. And for some reason, they were testing it, whether it was for safety or just learning about it. But I do remember moving along with this other group of people. So there were other humans there with me, and we were just kind of like getting this tour. We're getting this tour.
And all of you projecting or having yourselves projected into that environment, but all of you around the world, or perhaps in other planets or other galaxies, then appearing, because in those things there is no distance, right? So
yeah. And I mean,
or did you know that, or know that?
I don't think I was in my physical body, but I was 100% conscious, just like when I had my first astral projection experience. I was 100% conscious. I could look around the room. I could look down at my body in utter shock and dismay, like, what am I, how can I be there? But yet I'm also here and I can see the room. And so I think that experience happened so that I would learn that we can have those experiences, but we don't have to, and there are limitations on these physical bodies. These physical bodies are basically good for where we live. It's on this planet. Right. But it may not be okay to travel other distances in these bodies.
Do you think that actually you could be related to these beings, having a physical experience, and they're monitoring your physical experience. Had you ever considered that concept?
That
That
is
you're one of
exactly what
them,
I,
or an
that's
extension of one of them? Sorry.
yes. I mean, that is exactly what I think is happening.
Oh, okay.
100%. That's
Oh,
what I have come to
another lucky guess.
learn. That was very good extrapolation, but it's more than that. I mean, it's really a feeling that I've got, the sense of belonging, never having it been negative, but also just lots of sort of internal conversations that I had many times after experiences with just information that would kind of flow through. And it was just explaining like the human experience. What is the human experience? They're here to also learn about us, whatever this group is. It's a very compassionate group. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think every extraterrestrial is here for our benefit. Not that I would say like, you know, I don't want to go to that sort of dark side where I say that they're all bad either. There's something in between. But, you know, here's the thing. We don't know anything about them other than our own experience, as I said earlier. And we have a scale in this world that we call something good or bad, right? So
Yes.
let's just say like when you're experimenting on a species of animal and we're trying to help them, we're trying to save them, we're trying to make their world safe, maybe bring them back to health. When we capture them, to them, it's just fearful. Like they don't know what we're doing. And the only thing they can extrapolate is like, this other being has grabbed me and is doing something to me, but yet our intention is different. So I think it's the same in some instances where like we can only know our own experience. We don't really know why. But if you can get to the point where you're having a communication with them, remember, they've got to change their vibration as well. And so do you to communicate. And that was an experience that I had up in the high desert. So I had gone out with a group of people. I knew before.
Now, are we going to the high desert now? Because that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, let's go to the high desert.
Let's go to the high desert.
Because this is going to lead into a series of very fascinating events.
Okay.
Very impactful, very, very fascinating. And I think
from this side is going to be more fascinating, actually. So let's just get more fascinated. Just let it go. let's
let's do it. Let's go there.
Yeah, let's go.
Right. So
yeah.
I knew before going on this trip that
Yes.
I would see my same beings that I have been seeing since childhood. And they just communicated with me that they would be there. I just knew it. I mean, in my gut, I was 100% sure. And I mean, I could see them anywhere, but this situation was the most overt. It was just mind-blowing, actually. And so much of my whole life, all my experiences with them were leading up to the next several series of events that I'm going to share with you.
Please.
So, yeah, I mean, it was really something. So I was out in the high desert and
Where is the high desert?
So Southern California.
Okay, remember
areas.
Yeah, I'm from Toronto, so
From Toronto. So
I haven't been in the high desert.
Southern California.
Okay.
And there's quite some different areas that some people call the high desert, like around Palmdale, that's the high desert. Around other areas outside of LA, there's the high desert. And I had planned to go out with a group of people just to go do like a sky watch for a few nights. And so we had gone out a few nights before, and we weren't seeing that much, but it's always nice to sit out under the stars. And then this particular night, I just knew something was going to happen. I mean, I knew it in my gut. And so we parked down this little dirt road, and I had just met this new friend that was in this sort of in this group, and we drove up together. And we were, and this person too had lifelong connections with ETs, and he would draw them to him. I mean, he would go places and he would see them. I mean, so his connection was very strong. And so maybe the two of us, I think our energies were really helping to amplify things. And I really didn't know him very well at that time. I mean, I'd only known him for a few days, but we happened to be in the same vehicle to go up to this spot. So we were walking down this dirt road, and the group had gotten there maybe 10 minutes before us. So as we're walking down this road, and it's completely dark now, but we could see off in the distance the people that were already at the meeting spot. There were some flashlights, and all of a sudden I saw my beings, but I had never, I mean, it was huge. They were massive. It was
big, like big and tall beings.
Well, it was the disc.
Oh, okay.
And it started to come toward me, and it was scintillating, and the lights coming out of these little pinholes was so intense, and it glommed on my face, and I had to stop. And I said
the
to
lights,
the lights glommed on, and I could not see. I mean, I couldn't physically see. And I stopped and I just said, they're here. Oh my God, they're here. They're here. And I kept shaking my head like this because I couldn't see. I couldn't see to walk. Like I literally couldn't walk. And I would shake it off, and then I would walk a bit, and it would come back to me in my face. And he was sensing something was going on. Like he could feel like vibrationally, like the air was static, like static electricity in the air. That's how it felt. And so I kept shaking it off, going like, I cannot see where I'm going. And so we finally arrived at this meeting place, and people were kind of out and about, still just kind of walking around. So I sat down on this chair, I put my pack down, and when I looked down, this thing was sitting on my lap. It was on my lap because I looked down, and it's like, we want you to see us. This is important. You have to experience it. And I'm describing this to this person sitting next to me. It was remarkable. It was so intense. And I felt the energy in my body, like from up, like the waist up, almost like my vibration was very different. And I was having a hard time breathing at first. And then I just said, okay, you gotta change your vibration with this and just go with it. Just go with this. And then I started to see literally hundreds of them everywhere, all around me. And somebody was walking down one of the trails, started to call out, and they said, come down.
Hundreds of lights or hundreds of physical beings?
Light beings.
Okay, yes.
Hundreds of the light beings. Okay. And somebody called out and said, come down the trail, come down the trail. And there was a group of people, and they were sensing energy all around them. But what they didn't see was what I saw, which was these beings, these light beings, were all around them. And they were going up and down people's spine, going around their head, going in and out of the group. It was the most remarkable thing I've probably ever experienced. So people were sensing it, but I was seeing them, and they were coming toward me. And I mean, there had to have been hundreds, maybe thousands. I mean, the space was packed with them, and they were all around us. So people were definitely like aware of them, but what I was seeing was so intense, and people really enjoyed it. It wasn't scary. I mean, again, it was like a very positive feeling that everyone was feeling. And so we all started to kind of walk back to the meeting place, and people were kind of going off on their own little paths. I don't know if you've ever been out in the desert, but once it's very open. So once you can see a meeting space, you can literally just kind of walk across the desert. I got separated from the group a little bit. And as I was walking, this is just remarkable. I'm walking along, I'm looking down at the desert where I'm walking so I don't walk into a cactus. And an object gets thrown at my feet right in front of me. So they threw a luminescent object right at my feet, like literally right in front of me. I'm looking at this, I kneel down and I'm in utter disbelief. So it was a dumbbell shape, you know, the typical dumbbell that kind of has a hexagon. It was the brightest, shiniest silver you could even imagine. And again, it had the tiny little pinholes of light, and it was giving off so much light that it lit up the desert. So I'm in the pitch dark, I'm out in the desert, you know, there's no lights, there's no ambient light from a city, or there's nothing out there. And this object gets thrown in front of me at my feet, and it lights up the desert around it. And I am looking at this going, what is this that you're showing me? I mean, they threw it like as if somebody went like that and threw it right at your feet, and it stopped me. And I'm just staring at it. And I was like hypnotized by it. It was so intense. And I just sat with it for a moment, staring at it, pondering, like, is this your ship? Because we have this idea about size too, don't we? A ship has to be large or small. And all I could get from it is, I think this is some mode that they use for either transportation or I don't know. And then just like that, disappeared.
Yeah,
Completely
okay,
gone.
sure.
Completely gone. So at this point, I'm almost just drunk on this stuff. I mean, my energy is vibrating through the roof, and I kind of just stagger back to the group and sit down. And this friend that I had met, that I came with, could see that I was just, I don't want to necessarily use the word shaken in the way that it, like, it's bad, but just utterly like, what just happened? And so people were kind of talking a bit about their experiences. And then we just said, like, let's all close our eyes for a minute and just kind of have a moment of silence and think about it. And in that moment, in front of me, I saw the face of a being, and it was a woman. She had a very mottled kind of a skin color.
I'm sorry, what does mottled mean?
So it's sort of like spotty.
Okay.
Spotty, kind of
Right.
a beigey, greeny, browny color. And she showed me her head like spinning around so that I could see all the dimensions of her head. She had little points that almost looked a bit spiky.
So was it like a Linda Blair in The Exorcist spinning
Yeah.
around, or was it
Yeah.
like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
but it
just
wasn't
the
that,
head.
nothing else. Okay.
No, she just showed me the head,
Okay.
high cheekbones,
Yeah.
very cat-like eyes that were completely dark, no pupil, spinning around. And I'm looking at this and the detail of it in just disbelief, like, am I actually seeing this right now? And then she turns to me and she says telepathically, why do you look to the skies to see us when you can meet us in consciousness?
Whoa.
That was her message. And then she was
Wow.
gone. Right? So it's not about us up there. It's about, this is how we're going to meet in our consciousness. That's how we will connect. That's the connection that humans need to make. And yes, we show ourselves to you because it's a way of sort of letting you know we're here. But when you want to get to the deeper levels, it's going to be about meeting in consciousness. It's not going to be about just going and seeing a ship.
How did that affect your life?
It was massive. it was absolutely massive, but joyful.
Yes, of course.
Because it's like, this is what I live for.
Very
Because
simply, by what you're talking about and how I'm sensing what you're feeling, this isn't a burden to you. This is an enlightening experience for you. So
yes,
yeah.
highly enlightening. And it gives you another purpose from the mundane daily life that we live. And for me, it was like, I appreciate this connection with them, and that they would do this for me, to show up in such an overt way.
And your art, and when you're painting your rocks and things like that, are you also giving messages from that side to this side in your artwork? Is that part of your art as well?
It is. As a
Lucky
matter of fact.
guess.
Well, I created a
Yes.
little comic character called a Space
Yes.
Newbie.
Yes.
And you've heard of the Where's Waldo? Well, all of my art has a little space.
This was Where's Waldo wand.
Yes.
Yes, I have.
And they're in there. I also wrote a children's book called Adventures of the Space Nubies. And it's based on these little alien beings, and they live above a beautiful planet where there's flowers and plants, and basically they're the caretakers of the planet. And so they go down and they work in the gardens, but they live in little sky pods above it. So they're the caretakers. And that is something that sort of came out of a lot of my experiences, is that our purpose here was really to be caretakers of the planet. And somehow we got offline on that. We somehow lost our way. We are here to take care of this planet. Is phenomenal, even amongst the universes, the galaxies. This is a gem, and we've lost our way somehow. And if we continue to, we will lose our privilege of being here.
Debra Jacobson, quite potentially a second or third cousin, once removed to me. How can other people find you and discover more about your spiritual and extra I'm not quite sure how to say it. How can people find out about your travels with and connections with other beings that you're related to?
Well, I don't have a website or anything. I just consider
myself. So how can we find you?
Well, if people want to email me, they can certainly do that. If you want to post that, if they have experiences, I'm happy to have them reach out, because I think it's important for people to share, what they're experiencing, and know that it can be very positive. It can be.
How can we find your book?
On Amazon. I think it should still be on there. Adventures of the Space Nubies, Nubies. Yes. It's a children's book, but it does have lessons in it, which I think are part of that message, that let's start taking care of the planet and taking care of ourselves, and thinking about our attitudes, being kinder to each other. We've got to stop the warring and everything else we're doing. There are higher purposes, and it's not a given that we will always be here. It is just not given.
So is there any other media places where people could find you that you would like them to know about?
Well, I don't know if we have a minute.
We have all the time you want. Yes.
I do want people to see. I don't know. Do you have the photo? There was a photo that might want to share Do you
Okay,
have that?
I think Michelle would have it.
Okay, I might be able to share it here. Well, I just want to, I want to share this with folks because I think this is important because, you know, we all experience things differently and we all process information differently. And I'm not trying to make anybody believe anything. I kind of got past that a long time ago.
It's
I know,
easier that way.
well, and I know my experiences are authentic. And when I hear some experiences of other people that I think are kind of way out there, I think of mine and go, well, hey, what's to, you know, I know my experience was real. What's to say that theirs was not, you know?
Love your
But
attitude.
when you have something that you really can show people, I
Yes.
think it's important. And so let me do just a brief lead up to this, and I may be able to share my screen and actually show you the photo because I think I have it here. This friend that I had met in this last experience, we stayed in touch. And for a while, we decided we would sort of try to develop our psychic abilities. And so on a weekly basis, we would choose a photo or we would even draw a photo, and then we would focus on it and try to send elements of that image to each other. And then we would meet up that week and we would talk about what we were picking up. So we really kind of started to, over several months, develop some pretty good skills with that. And during one of those conversations late at night, I suddenly got this intense download of information. And it was interesting because this person was living on the other side of the country. I'm out here, Western, US. And we both suddenly felt a presence. And this person said to me, this is really weird, but I feel like there's somebody in the room. And so did I. And we almost had like goosebumps. And I got this massive download of information from this group. They said they were from Lyra. I really didn't know anything about Lyra. I had to go look it up. And they said, they were giving me images of them. And they were saying, we are part of your family. You come from this group. This is where you're from. And they gave some personal messages for a particular person that needed some healing. And without going into more detail on it, they basically said, if you go to this location, we will show ourselves to you. And they gave us a specific location. So that set in motion a trip that we decided, well, let's just do this because it was so impactful to us. And the energy was so strong that when they left, we could also, it was almost like, like a relief, like we really felt, and it's not like I'm a channeler. I don't call myself a channeler.
What did they look like?
So they looked like very, not gray, but very light colored. They did have the oval eyes. They weren't like the short grays. They were actually kind of very tall and very long arms and very long fingers.
Did you like the way they looked?
Didn't bother me at all. The energy wasn't in any way negative. And they were giving some important messages about a specific person's health.
So you felt good about the energy?
I felt good.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't afraid, and it was such a powerful connection.
Sure.
Now, it might have been related to what happened previously, because here I am talking to the same person who had the previous experience with me. And so we decided we're doing this road trip. Like we are going to go to this place that they told us. They said, if you go there, we'll show ourselves to you. And I think they wanted to do it so they knew it was authentic, but I also feel like it's a learning experience for people who hear this. And I will tell you this, I have shown this photo to people, I have explained it to them, and many of them draw a complete blank. They get into a very strange space when they see it. my expectation was people were going to go, wow, oh my gosh, an authentic picture. Like she was told to go there. She took this picture. This being from Lyra showed up, but that has not necessarily been the experience. So people experience this in a different way, and it's just not right or wrong. It's just where they're at that moment. And for some people, it's like they feel like they want to really know about it, but they don't. They're not ready. They're not. So, and that's okay, because they're seeing that photo for a reason. There's a reason for it. So, so leading up to going to that space, we took the road trip, and it's pretty far down a back road where we had to go. And on the way down that back road, so I was a passenger. This friend that I had met was in the front seat, and we had someone in the back. And so we're driving along. It's starting to get later. We're trying to go to the B&B where we're going to stay overnight. And my friend says to me, something's going on here. I have a really strong metallic taste in my mouth. And at that very moment that he said that, the top of my head started buzzing. And I just said, stop the car right now. And at that very moment, a deer jumped out of the bush, and it came so close to the car that we brushed its tail.
Wow.
We brushed its tail.
Wow.
And he stops the car. And I mean, what do you think the typical response would have been like? Oh my God, oh wow, my heart's pounding. We almost hit this deer. It would have come in right on my side and hit me, but we didn't. We had almost no reaction. We just went, oh wow, okay. And we carried on. We went to the B&B, and the next morning we got up and I was eating breakfast, and I said, you guys, listen, that experience we had here, think about it. Not one of us reacted. I'm yelling, stop the car. We almost hit a deer. It almost crashes in the window. We had almost no reaction. And they went, you're right. What in the world was that about? We didn't even react. So I don't understand that. I don't know, but I think there was an intervention there that happened. Or maybe something else happened and we don't remember, but not one of us reacted. And there's no way. I mean, I can be a little bit of a jumpy driver. If somebody cuts me off, I'm like, I'll react. And we had no reaction. So that was the precursor to something else happening later that night. And we went out just to a big open space. And the third person wanted to stay behind. And so we just went out. And, I felt like I'm going to go there with an open mind. And if these Lyrans do show up, great. And if they don't, I'm okay with it. At least I tried. So I didn't want to have a big expectation. So we sat out till quite late. And at one point, I started to feel sort of a buildup of energy. And then it was weird, like it just completely dissipated. So we were thinking, well, maybe we should just head back to the B&B and we'll come back tomorrow. And then I said, you know what? Let's just take some photographs, like let's just do some rapid fire photographs. So we went ahead and did that. And we didn't really notice anything else special happening. And we went back to the room. And the next morning I was looking through my photographs, and there it was. So what happened is I took a series of photos, and we were looking out into a dark, huge open field. There were some other, just sort of like lawn chairs that were out there. Nobody else was out there but us. There were no people. It's completely black. And then in the next shot, we see this interdimensional being, and in the next shot, completely gone. So before, nothing. One frame, the being, the next frame, nothing. And it's an amazing photograph. And I believe it is that that being from Lyra. There's a being. It's standing next to a lawn chair, and we're on some benches in behind it. You'll see that it's leaning over and looking right at us. You'll notice on the chest, it has a very, very bright, brilliant, luminescent, some kind of medallion. Okay, I don't know what it is, but it's on its chest. You'll see the face, you'll see the eyes. It's definitely not a human face. It's some kind of extraterrestrial type face. You'll see the mouth, you'll see the arm, and you'll just see it. I mean, there's no doubt. And it's not completely solid. It's like it's phasing in. That's what I'm going to describe it that way. It's just kind of phasing in, but not, you know, it cannot, that picture can't be mistaken as if, oh, well, that's just a person out in the field. Absolutely not. You'll see that right away.
What fascinating stories. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And I hope if anyone listening to this, if it helps them in some way, then that's really my purpose of sharing all this.
Wow, what an amazing, unbelievable show tonight. I'd like to thank my guest, Debra Jacobson, fellow native Torontonian, now living on the West Coast, for sharing all your insights about your connections with aliens, UFOs, and a million other things. Thank you, Debra, for joining us. Just before I say goodbye, though, we've got a couple of more requests. If you are watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. By the way, subscriptions are complimentary. They don't cost anything, but they sure add a lot to our show. It brings, the more comments, the more subscriptions that we get, the more views that we're also going to get in the future. Please just click on yes, or then make a comment. And once again, comments are very important for getting more and more recognition on YouTube. And if you make a comment, good, bad, or indifferent, I promise you, I will comment you right back. You can also find us on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, and pretty much anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And if you would like to find me personally, you can find me at www.robertlincymilne.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and yes, indeed, TikTok as well. And now, just as I'm saying goodbye, please remember, do good, stay safe, and above all, just be kind. Good night, everybody.